I am representing Hofstra University as an associate professor and program director. I'm the program director for business education, family and consumer sciences, and work-based learning. So there's my email address and my phone number. If you have any questions about anything to do with CTE, professional development, Hofstra University, work-based learning, feel free to either email me or call me, and I will also have my contact information at the end. As I said to Tanya before a lot of people got on, this is the first really positive thing about the pandemic. This conference would definitely have been postponed if we were in a face-to-face at the UFT building. So first thing I wanted to mention is, problem-based learning or project-based learning are hot topics, if you will, and a lot of administrators are interested in seeing it when they come into your classroom. So I hope that this will be helpful. Please feel free to use the chat room for any questions that you have. And Tanya Navis from the DOE is facilitating, if you will, and and she will warn me as I'm busy chit-chatting and sharing information. She'll stop me if you have any questions. Tanya, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Tanya Navas. As Marsha said, I am part of the program approval and quality team. I am the director for program quality as well as a program quality manager. I oversee most of Brooklyn, not Brooklyn South. That's my colleague, John Jastrzemski. But if you're in Brooklyn, you probably fall into my portfolio. Thanks, Marsha. Welcome, everybody.
Okay, so the reason that I put problem/project-based learning, originally the people who at the Buck Institute were the ones that sort of coined this frame, and they now are no longer the Buck Institute. I think they are PBL Central or something like that. And originally project-based learning was the high school or K through 12 title, and problem-based learning was the college one. I personally like the idea of I call it problem-based learning, and that's because a project is where I tell you what to do. So I want to create a database, and I'm going to teach you how to do it. So I tell you, okay, we're going to press this button. You're going to create 5 columns. You're going to create 3 of this, 4 of that. Put this number here, put that number. It's valuable. We need to do that. But I did all the thinking. I did all of the organizing. I did all of the instruction. Whereas problem-based learning, and that's why I subtitle it, Who's Doing the Thinking, a problem I present to kids and they solve it. And then there is no right or wrong answer, but they're thinking. And quite honestly, if you will, in the keynote this morning, it's why I was so intrigued by the work of Colin, because critical thinking is a huge part of PBL. Again, both projects and problems have a place in our classrooms, but from my perspective, they are different. Okay, so why isn't this? Okay. So in this session, you are going to explore what PBL or problem-based learning is. We're going to be talking about the required elements of it, appreciate what it does to our classrooms, and even in a virtual environment, I think PBL can be successful, and also that kids are taking responsibility for learning. And then we're going to analyze some examples of PBL and CTE. In addition, and I'll again mention this at the end, I have this presentation, my slide deck, as they say, and also some handouts so that if we were in the face-to-face environment, I would provide you. that I'll be happy to send you if you email me. And I'll tell you what I would be sending you as we go through this. So why is PBL so critical? Why is it so important? And that's because there's a skill gap. They really, many employers share, complain, speak a lot about the fact that kids can do their jobs, but they lack problem-solving skills. That is, if you don't tell them exactly, they don't know what to do. How often have you had a kid say to you, what do I do next? What do I share? So before we go on, and again, I'd like to employ the chat room for this. How many of you are using PBL or have used PBL in your classrooms? And what are some of the challenges that you find?
You can also raise your hands and then I can get an overview of how many of you are using PBL.
Yes. And you do that in the reaction section.
Right, exactly. Okay, I got Robert, I got Leonard, Ms. Wilkes, Mr. Harvey, Andreas. Okay, Bruce Levinson, I use them for medical case studies. Very cool. We use it in CTE classes as well as other classes. Donna LaPiccolo. Mr. Gonzalez, yeah.
And as we go along, if you have ideas about any of the things that I'm talking about, please feel free to share. This is a sharing, hopefully. PBL and healthcare, yes, and CFM. There are so many problems that you can present that to kids for them to solve. Colleen, technical theater, wow, good. Graphic design classes, solving design, that's what they need to do in the real world. Professional diving, absolutely. What do you do when? How do you make this better? What's the best way to do that? Buffalo case studies. What is Buffalo case studies? Donna, what is Buffalo case studies?
It's a subscription to the I forget, I can give you the exact title. It's my teachers went up there for training, but you don't have to go for training. They provide you with different types of case studies that you can implement into the classroom, and they have different levels.
Great. Okay, terrific. Good. Anthony, you were in the session before. Great. Computer programming. Absolutely. Okay, so and why is this important? There was a study recently about what employers want. They want, this isn't a big surprise, they want people who get there, who show up. They want people for whom they can depend. They want people who are self-motivated. And that's really a big part of PBL, is that motivation. They want a positive representation of their brand, who rise to the occasion, who are team players and have a positive attitude. So much of this is tied up in kids being able to collaborate, problem solve, and then present and share their information. All of those, as we're going to see, are part of PBL. So you present a problem, usually to a group. The kids collaborate, and I'm going to actually even share at the end how you might want to conceptualize this for virtual learning, and then present it to what they call an audience. Okay. So it's a teaching tool where students gain knowledge by investigating and responding to complex, so it's not just what do you do next, authentic Obviously, that's a big, big, big part of CTE, and real world problems and challenges. In the last session that I presented with Liz Gallo, I mentioned that if you have an advisory board, you can ask your advisory board members to provide you with real business problems in your area, and then present them to the kids to solve them. And I've even seen where they go back and share their solutions to the board members or the advisory board members. Okay, so I like to say it is not the dessert, but the main course. Very often, especially when we're doing projects, we teach, and do a project. Teach, let the kids do it. Teach. This is not that. We really are flipping it. You're providing the problem up front and having the kids solve it. So I recently was doing a PBL with middle school teachers, and they mentioned that, they give the kids, it was in a family and consumer sciences class, and they gave the kids all the stuff for a party of 10, the decorations, the food, and the kids costed it out. How much did this cost? How much did that cost? And they said, isn't that a problem-based learning? And I said, yeah, but how much more effective would it be if you said you want to have a party for 10 people? How would you make it? How would you envision it? How would you cost it out? And how would you plan it? So there, I don't have to tell you that you're going to have hot dogs and hamburgers and this. You decide. You may want to make your own tacos. And so your ingredients are totally different from mine. So it's not a string of activities. It's a set of learning experiences that guide the student's inquiry. You are providing a problem, they are solving it, and they are meeting that challenge. And when I say it's not making something hands-on learning or doing an activity, again, I don't want anybody to think that I am saying that making something hands-on learning and doing an activity don't have a place in our classrooms. They do. Very often they are the precursor to a problem. So you may have to teach some skills. You may have to have them do some hands-on, and then you present a problem. And it goes back to my thought is, who's doing the thinking and the planning? So you ask kids higher order thinking questions. I call these hot questions. I did mention before that I'm a professor and program director at Hofstra, and my student teachers, I tell them all the time, in your planning of your lesson, create your hot questions. I always tell them I'm smart enough on my feet as I'm teaching to say, okay, who was the last person who did that? Who is this? Who is that? What is that? What is that? But those connecting and higher order thinking questions, the analyzing, the evaluating, the synthesis, I'm not smart enough on my feet to do it. And I'm presuming that at their level of skills, they probably aren't either. So put those hot questions in your lesson plans. That's what you're doing in terms of problem-based learning, is asking that higher order thinking question that encourages exploration. Again, creating a database is necessary, but that's not a higher order thinking question. How would you present material when you learn or when you investigate client likes? When you're creating a marketing plan, how would you determine what you should stock on your shelves? That's a higher order thinking question that may involve creating a database. So what is great about PBL, and I call it the win-win, is that kids are more motivated. When they are working together, they love talking and sharing information with each other. So their motivation is increased. And when motivation increased, we know when kids are motivated, they achieve more. So motivation is increased and achievement is increased. And retention of knowledge is increased. How good is that? How great is that? I say to my students, and I'll say to you, remember, think back to the first time you taught any subject, any class. At the beginning of that class, the first time you taught it, compare it to the end. How much smarter were you? After you explained it, or after you had the pitfalls, after you knew what the reasons are. I'll use myself as an example. I've been teaching for 53 years. Can you believe it? Anyway, when I started teaching before computers were even invented. That's how old I am. So the first time I taught computer applications, I knew what I needed to do to get through that course. Talk about staying 2 lessons ahead. But if a kid said to me, Mrs. Iverson, what do I do about this? Or look what I have on my screen. What did I do to get that? It's wrong. I didn't really know what they did wrong in order to get that. But I'll tell you, by the end of the semester, I was so much smarter. Because when you teach things and you share things and you explain things to other people, all things that are part of PBL, you get smarter. So you retain the knowledge more. Engagement. I actually saw a PBL at Automotive High School in Brooklyn at one point on welding. And the kids themselves said, I never even came to school. I hated coming to school. My attendance record was abysmal. But now, since we've been doing this together and solving this problem, I haven't missed a day. Pretty cool, pretty amazing. And then, obviously, the mastery of the work skills. So, in the chat room, if you would, especially those who have used PBL, what have you seen as the benefits of PBL in your students, your class, and quite honestly, for yourself?
Folks, you can also unmute yourself if you want to share out loud.
Workplace challenges, summer CTE paid internships. Good.
Okay.
Lori, I wish young, you mean. Ha ha ha.
Sure. I can talk a little bit about this. So I run a research program. It's a science research program, which is based on problem-based learning. And the degree of confidence and critical thinking that students acquire is very noticeable. I have the opportunity to review this for 3 years with students, and so I agree with what our speaker is saying, which is, but the trick is to learn how to keep the ball on the other in their court as much as possible, because everything becomes a question. The only thing maybe I can highlight here that I'd like to emphasize is that the art of questioning is really where it all ends up and where it all leads to. And so figuring out how to allow the student to develop a question and to guide the student in such a way that the question becomes valuable is indeed motivating. And so students who
And
stay
required.
with it, yes, students who stay with it usually keep it and get to the end. Whereas students who are given the questions are usually, when the going gets tough, they're the first ones that stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And teaching kids the skills, you know, even the social skills. How do you work in a group? How do you share ideas? How do you know? I can disagree vehemently with you, but it doesn't mean that I never talk to you again. You know, that's part of learning how to be in a group. And I like what Leonard said in terms of they learn what they need to do and what the errors are. When, you know, I think there was, it could have been Casey Stengel who said, I learned more from my mistakes than my successes. Maybe not. But that's really an important part, is the reflection. I always tell my student teachers, every single lesson that you write, you should, at the end of it, put a post-it. What worked well? What didn't work well? Because the truth is that you probably won't be teaching that class again, that topic again, for a minimum of 6 months to a year. Are you going to remember what worked and didn't work? Well, that's the same thing that we talk about when we talk about contemporary projects, portfolios, workplace challenges, dives, anything that you're asking kids to do. It is critical that they reflect, but that they know how to question as well. Question each other, question you. I had a teacher, I was a principal of a school, and there was a teacher in my school who I would go in there to hear how she never answered a question. A kid could say, Miss S, where do I find this tool? And she would go, I mean, it could be something like milk, you know, and the answer is, what are you kidding? The refrigerator. But she would go, well, I don't know. Or what do you think? Or what do you think the answers might be? So she was the best at never answering a question. The kids are very quick to say, is this what you had in mind? Is this right? And what's my next step? What do you want me to do next? That's for you to decide. Is this working for you? What do you think of where you are now? What other questions do you think problems may arise? Those are the kinds of things that we do, and we force kids to do the higher level thinking rather than us pouring it into the beaker.
If I can add to that,
Sure.
I think the point you just made needs to be sort of developed, because a teacher needs to be able to let go and be comfortable with letting go, because students usually have been trained to look for the answers from the teacher. And as a matter of fact, some kids will say, well, isn't that your job to tell us the answers? And so it's important to know how to navigate and let go, and be okay with even be okay with not knowing the answer. Because if it's a genuine problem, no one knows the answer yet. And being okay with saying, well, you know, this is being okay with the process and understanding how to guide through the process to get to an answer. And I found that is a very rewarding experience.
And there's nothing
my career.
wrong with saying, that's an interesting problem. What do you think we should do about it? How are we going to find the answer? You may not know the answer. I remember when I first started teaching sports and entertainment marketing, what I know about a football draft, you could probably put in a thimble, if you even know what the hell that is. But anyway, and but I was learning. The kids knew more than me about football and the draft and all of that stuff, but they were problem solving, and I could provide questions for them that I didn't even know the answer. So we learn together. So here are the essential elements of PBL. It needs to be a significant content. That is, it's not where do you put this, where do you place this, and I go back to that database, but really significant, that it has in-depth inquiry, driving question. That's the problem. That's what you create. You create the question that they need to answer. Not only that, you know what they need to know in order to do it. So let's say I was going to have the kids, and again, I'm going back to a computer applications example, some document, something to share, to reflect on your life that you'll present to your parents at graduation. I don't know why I use that. I know they're going to need to import photos. I know they're going to need to create columns, may need to create columns. I know what to teach them as they're going through the process. Some people say that PBLs have to be a long-term experience. I have done PBLs in 1 minute, in one period rather, and I've done them over a semester. So you can have more than one going at a time. There needs to be, and kids love this, that they have a voice in it and there's a choice. There's no one right or wrong answer. And that your feedback or the feedback from each other enables and encourages them to revise and reflect. And then we'll get to the public audience afterwards, which is the last element. So here's the C's. Critical thinking, we've talked a lot about that. Collaboration, because I'm working as part of a team, I am absolutely required to collaborate. Communication, again, one of the things that employers are always telling me, they don't know how to express themselves appropriately. And creativity and innovation. Everybody's answer is not going to be the same. And it shouldn't be, because there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they like to say. Okay, so because the kids are working in groups and independently, and again, this is more, I guess, if it's a face-to-face, you can actually do more differentiation, because you know the kids or the groups that are having difficulty with a specific part of it. You go from being, and this is an old expression, being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. You can coach, you can help, you can become like the project manager. I even had a teacher who set it up as a business, and when the groups had questions, they had to make an appointment to meet with him. He wanted the kids to mirror what happens in a business situation. And what, oops, sorry. Hold on a minute. Okay. He wanted to mirror what happens in a real business. And it does change the culture of the classroom. The kids, and again, you can have more than one of these going on at a time, and it's not doesn't have to be every day, but you're in control of how that works. This is what I wanted to show you. And I think it was Mauricio who said something about control. When I demonstrate, I have all the control. I do it, you watch. Teacher support. Look at where this goes. When you do it and I watch, where I'm the guide on the side, the kids have the control and I have to require little or no support. Isn't that what we need to be doing in CTE to make sure that kids are ready for the real world? They can't be dependent on me saying, do this now, do this now, do this now. What do you do next? What problems did you exhibit? How can you solve that? What are some of the pitfalls? So which of those strategies might you use to solve that problem? So the level of the learner control goes up and the teacher's support goes down. Just what we want for the real world. So here's the idea. You obviously have to know what it is that you want, the idea that you want them to, the problem to be around. You're going to create a driving question. If your school requires that you address some of the standards, that's whether you were thinking about that. Culminating, you want to say, you know, if I do as a supervising teacher at Hofstra, I can't tell you the number of lessons I go in and observe at a variety of schools. If I hear a teacher say one more time, okay, so now you're going to create 5 PowerPoint slides about this topic. Where the hell 5 came to be the end all be all, and why PowerPoint slides? If I asked you to convince somebody of something, maybe you don't do PowerPoint slides. Maybe you do a poster. Maybe you do a video. I had a class where I gave the kids a problem, and one group created a game for the computer. I couldn't create a computer game, if ever in my life, I'm sure. They knew more than I did, but did they answer the question? The question was, how can you convince your peers not to drive and drink? 5 PowerPoint slides, who cares? Maybe that's not the way you would do it. Maybe an ad campaign, maybe announcements on the PA. Maybe this group created a game. It was beyond amazing and certainly beyond my abilities, but it didn't matter. So you may want to leave it more open-ended. Here's a big thing. When you assign a problem, don't say, okay, it's February 1st. This is due March 1st. And nothing happens in between. You just let the kids hang out and do whatever they do for a month. Creating, by this date, I want this. By this date, I want this. I want the idea by this date. I want the schematic by this date. I want to know who's doing what by this date. That does 2 things. One is, you know as well as I do, there are kids that won't do anything until February 28th, and that's not okay. And number 2 is you're doing formative assessments. The process is as good as the product, because we want to assess the process as much as the product. Does it really matter what the product is? Is the thinking and the sharing and the problem solving more important? I think so. You obviously may need to provide resources or share resources, and how you're going to be reflecting on it. Essentially, that may be the public audience or your rubric. This is the schematic, if you will, for creating it. Tanya, I forgot, what time is this over?
Sorry, I was muted. I believe you're done at 12:15.
Okay, good. I do have a lot of time. All righty. Okay. I was getting nervous that
Oh, Marsha, you're muted.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Which of these parts do you either have difficulty with, got it down, or need some explanation on? Anybody want to share anything about the steps? I mean, the elements of PBL?
Again, you can unmute yourself and speak up or put it in the chat.
What do you mean, Leonard? Do tomorrow, do today, tomorrow?
Whenever I give a deadline for a project, an assignment, I instinctually know that the students will put off giving me any kind of progress report until the day before it's due. And then that night or early that morning, they're going to cobble together something that doesn't quite perform up to what's needed standard-wise.
Absolutely. I like that. Do tomorrow, do tomorrow. And that's part of those benchmarks or checkpoints that I call. Years ago, again, when I was a principal of a school, I had a teacher who created, a PBL for his final exam. He was a technology teacher. And he called me the night before the end of school, and he said, "So you made me do this, and now I have 75% of my kids that don't have a grade. They're all getting zeros." His idea for his PBL was excellent. It was to create something that solved a problem in the home. Basically like a Rube Goldberg kind of thing. I mean, the kids had some great ideas, but he didn't say by June 1st, I need this. By June 10th, I need this. By June 15th, I need this. You know, your idea, the schematic, the materials I need, whatever. So on June 24th, 75% of his kids had nothing. That's sort of like listening to one half of the story and not the other. He didn't get that. So of course, you know, he was like crazed and blaming me when in fact, he didn't design it correctly. Creating a timeline, Zelene, is a great idea for completion as a class, and therefore consensus is built. That is, okay, by this date, we're going to have this. By this, it may be something you self-impose because you know what you want, or as a class. And then if you give the same problem to all groups, there can be actually a reflection of what was great about that one. How would I change mine now after I've heard all of the groups? So that's terrific. Any others? Anybody else want to chime in on this one? Okay. I need to take that off. All righty. Sorry. Okay, so here again is just a review. Your problem formation. Here's where you form what the problem is going to be. How are we going to? How would you do this? When would you? How might you share this information, etc.? Again, what prior knowledge do they need to know? What questions might you pose? They then design the plan, they gather the information, they create the artifacts, and they present the solution. These pose questions. One of the steps that I require in my PBLs is that the groups provide me with questions that they need or clarification that they need in order to go further. You could do this individually, you could do it as a group, you could do it as you go around to the groups as you go. So those are the steps. Okay. Driving or focus questions. And I am going to go, let me see. Okay. I was going to show you a list. I think what I'm going to do is I'll do it at the end, maybe. But I need this idea of the driving or focus question is really the critical piece. There are no wrong or right answers. There are reasonable solutions. And this is how you're going to assess them on, is their thinking, and they're essentially thinking out of the box. How and what do they need necessary to address the issue? The driving question should be provocative and challenging. As we said before, it's not just what do they do about, what's the next step? Open-ended and linked to the core of what you want the students to learn, obviously. And you don't have to say you're going to do 5 PowerPoint slides. You can leave it open-ended. It could be a report, it could be a presentation, it could be a brochure, it could be a debate, it could be demonstrations, it could be anything that evidences how the evidence of student learning. And they can create all sorts of things. That's what makes this so powerful and so preparatory, if you will, for careers, for CTE. This is what employers, if you go back to what they originally said, want from our students. Potential audiences. That public audience is the last piece they presented. So you could have them just presented to the class. Other adults in the school, when I was teaching, I very often asked board members, principals, department heads, etc. Not only were they blown away by the stuff that I was doing in my class, but the kids were really impressed by their feedback. And other adults outside the school, here's an opportunity to use your advisory board members in a really positive way. People that you do business with, anybody outside the school. One of the things that I'm a bug about, even when they're not doing PBLs, but when you're asking to debrief an activity in the class, is I believe that high school students have mastered the skill of sleeping with their eyes open. You ask these kids to debrief, this group says this group says that. They're all staring at them, and nobody. If you ask them, what did that group say? I have no idea.
That's awesome, Marsha.
So when your class is debriefing, even if it's a short closure activity, what are the other kids doing? Are they writing down the idea? Are they asking one question? Are they making one suggestion? Are they saying one thing that they learned from it? Something. Even when you're showing a video, how many of us show YouTubes for 5 and 6 minutes? They're staring at it. Ask them what happened. They have no idea unless it's one of these joke things. Because they have mastered that skill. They got it. They learn that. So I require, if I'm having a student audience, is what did you learn? What's one thing that you would suggest that you were impressed with? What's one suggestion you might make? And again, even the adults in the room or the adults that you call in, not just that was great, that was great, that was great. Why? You could even have a reflection sheet that you ask kids or people to reflect on. Okay. After that public audience, the students reflect on their own work, the audience reflects, and they ask each other questions. One of the things I like to say after a PBL is, now that you've heard all the suggestions, how would you change your solution? What did you learn from others that would now be helpful in your solution? Isn't that what business requires? Nobody sits, when they were in an office, nobody sits in an office and says, oh my God, I got to think of this solution. I'm going to stay here until 5 o'clock and come up with it. They walk to the next place or call somebody and say, did you ever have this problem with a client? What did you do about it? That's what we need to have kids do. You know, the old thing is, I learned everything I learned was in kindergarten. In kindergarten, they do all that collaboration. After first grade, sit, stare in front, don't look to the left, don't look to the right. This breaks that down. This mirrors what needs to be done in the real world. So I was thinking, and I actually did a session on PBL and the online learning, and I created opportunities. Here are the steps in a PBL, and this is a all group, an opening board meeting, again mirroring what happens in the real world. Then you create the groups, and the kids pose questions and design a plan and gather information. They do that on their own in a committee. Then you come back, checkpoint, check progress, provide feedback. Then they go back to their committee and they create artifacts, and then they present solutions. And that's the stakeholders meeting. I really like this idea of using terminology that's used in real world in businesses. So there's an opening board meeting. Here's the problem. Now go ahead, guys, and solve it. Come back. So when I taught, I'll go back to that in a second. When I taught marketing, actually, in a high school environment years ago, I actually retired from the Valley Stream School District in 2003, if you can imagine. This year will be 18 years that I've been retired. Shock, shock, shock. Anyway, so I also was the treasurer of the school. And I realized that the yearbook was in bad financial shape. They were not going to be able to produce a yearbook that wasn't going to be $150 if they didn't do something about raising money. So I went to the yearbook advisor and I said, would you like my marketing class to do marketing for the yearbook? Oh my God, absolutely. I said, well, have your editor and assistant editor come to my class and make a presentation to us. So that was a pro bono client that came to us and said, here's where we are, here's what we need. What do we do about it? And then that was the opening board meeting. Then I had committees. I had put the kids into 3 or 4 groups. And I said, come up with ideas to present to our client. They had to check with me. And then they did presentations to the yearbook staff. The yearbook staff came in and each of the groups made their presentation, their pitch about what should be done. And then they came up with 3 ideas. I had to massage the groups a little because the ones that didn't win, if you will, were infused into the other ones. And then they actually did it. My class, my marketing class, raised $7,400 for the yearbook that year. They did what they were studying. It was truly amazing. One of the ideas was, they sent letters to all the parents to do children's pages, like, your life, your kid's life, and the parents had all these pictures and they created it. One was, students, they did something with students, friends pages. And the other was a student faculty basketball game. So I sent the group to the principal and I said, okay, here's what we want to do. The principal said, last year we had a student faculty basketball game. A teacher got hurt and they filed for workman's comp. So the district is not going to have any more of that. They come back to class and they say, we can't do what we want. They say none. I said, well, what do you want? What do you think the reason is? I said, what do you think could be done about it? Well, what if the teachers sign a waiver that they won't file, if they get hurt, they won't file a workman's comp? I said, well, who do you think is in charge? It was a small district. They went to the assistant superintendent for business. I didn't even go. They went all dressed up, business suits, business attire, and they went to the assistant superintendent, made their case, and he said, fine. They drew up a release, and the kids raised about $3,700 at a student faculty game. I didn't do any of it. Was I the guide on the side? Did I check for progress? Did I provide feedback? Absolutely. But they did it themselves. True PBL. And in that case, we actually even had a client, which is pretty impressive. Okay, any thoughts so far? Any questions before I go on to problem formation? Anybody in the chat room? I love him. Thank you, Lori. You're really good. First you tell me I'm young, and then you tell me I'm engaging in real. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so I'm going to
Marsha, there's a question about your thoughts on assessments in a project-based learning model.
Okay. So in terms of assessments, I do two things. Well, actually three. One of them is on the group process. I really make a big deal about how groups need to effectively work. And that becomes my rubric for class participation. So I actually, after the first lesson, I say to the kids, I make a T-chart. And I say, if good teaming is going on, what would I hear and what would I see? So I might hear kids laughing. I might see people sharing material. I might hear disagreements. I might see and da-da-da-da-da. Then I make a big chart, and that becomes my rubric for group participation. Anytime they're in a group, I can walk over and say, Bridget, what part of good teaming don't I see right now? You're off task. Your grade today is less than somebody, Leonard, who's like totally on target. So they get a group participation grade or an individual participation grade every single day. And then I will assess based on a rubric at the various checkpoints as well as the summative. And that becomes an average or a percentage. It can, depending on, it might not be a direct average, but I might weight them a little bit depending on what it is, because I am certain that the product is not as important as the process. So assessing the process as well as the product becomes critical. Did that answer your question, Bridget?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I want to stop sharing this and then share my screen again. And I want to go, how do I end this? End show. That would be helpful, right? Okay. What I wanted to show you is this. This is, by the way, if you send me your email, I'll be one of the things that I'll be doing it. So here are possible driving questions in various disciplines. How can you motivate your peers who believe they are immortal to get regular checkups? Really good one for health professions. Or how can you motivate not only your peers, your clients, your patients to get regular checkups? How should automobiles be designed for 2025? Boy, that's going to come up soon, right? Not to smoke, develop an increase in green construction. How can the public analyze the validity of advertisements? Oh, this is have a food truck. Uh-oh, here should be a T, huh? Okay. Come to school for lunch pill. Your task is to design. What was I thinking? Was I drunk that day? Design and decide all aspects of the operation. That's a great one for a culinary program or even a business one. A piece of equipment, you're in charge of how you go about designing a brand. Choose a piece of equipment and apply your strategy to it. All of these are possible examples. How can you convince your peers not to vape or any other topic of interest? How would you compete with the existing whatever, your competitors, your professional sporting teams, other people? Essentially creating a marketing plan. So looking at these topics, what I wanted you to do now, and we can do this in the chat room rather than in a breakout session, Tanya, I think, is come up with an idea for a PBL for your classroom. Based on all of this, what might you be, what would be a good driving question? And by the way, the other thing that I'll be sending you is this template that I've created, which has the culminated products for the group and the individual, because you may want to have individual kids do something, the assessments, and the resources and the reflection method. So I'll be sending you that as well. So take about 3 or 4 minutes stop sharing that. You don't need to see my grandchildren and my hair with the other color. And share in the chat room one PBL idea that you think would be helpful based on the material that I've provided. Leonard, can I ask you for your for clarification? I'm not sure what you mean by I have ultimate power over the job.
When it comes down to the student safety, I'm putting students into New York Harbor. And while they are tethered, there are certain inherent risks for diving in the harbor. And if I see a part of the plan that would put them at an increased risk, it is my most humble goal to never be in front of a parent apologizing or being on the evening news explaining what happened. And I crack jokes that you're not the only old one in the group. I have 40 plus years of being a professional diver. So I'm really fairly conversant
How
with things that
can
go
you
wrong.
relate that or put that into a PBL?
I will ask them to actually go through step for step what's going to happen and have the other students come up with ways of, I don't want to say knocking it down, but of questioning outcomes. So they can, well, if this happens, what are we going to do? If that occurs, what are we going to do? Diving in New York Harbor means you're dealing with vessel traffic, you're dealing with wake, you're dealing with poor visibility, or dare I say it, polluted water, hazardous materials on the bottom. So I have them question it.
So you could actually, one of the problems is if you were instructing a new student coming into the program, design something that will teach them the safety steps or, the hazards or the how to of diving.
The program is actually a 3-year program. So the first year, they're just learning basic diving skills. For the second year, they're learning the scientific component, and we start adding the commercial diving skills to that. But all that training is done in confined water in a pool. And we generally design the class to give them the most freedom to see what's going on, what's happening. There are times where we'll reference back to the first year or the second year and say, what do you think the outcome's going to be? What are you going to
Those are
try?
great problems to decide. Now, by the way, you might have, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, give each group a different problem or possible issue and have them investigate that and then put it together in a manual. That would be a great PBL, I think.
We do have the students add to our safety manual.
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure my program gives the Department of Education's lawyers screaming nightmares pretty much every night. So we do have a safety manual, which we have to adhere to. We're also beholden to OSHA regulations in some areas, and other areas we're exempt. But I like the idea of separating the problems. Generally speaking, there is a board in the classroom that is classically, it's a workboard taken off of a job site.
Right.
And the students have to decide who's doing what. There are surface skills, there are underwater skills.
And
from
by
that
the
point of
way,
view.
you're talking about, the lawyers being, having headaches or gray hairs from your program. I have Bruce, who, how do you design a lifestyle plan for a patient with diabetes type 2? His students go into hospitals. Talk about, issues there with parents and lawyers. So, while I'm not diminishing or, saying that yours is, is not, but, a lot of us look at food poisoning in culinary program, kids' hair falls out in a cosmetology program, whatever, or a dental program. So, how do you design a lifestyle? And that could be different. You might also, Bruce, instead of a lifestyle plan for a patient with, and then give each group a different malady. So this one will be for diabetes, this one will be for hypertension, this group will be for another thing. So you can vary it that way and then put together a manual of all of this stuff. And C. Dorzio, how do you prepare a catered event for 30 people from designing designing a menu from the menu to the delivery of food? Absolutely. There's a good example, and it doesn't have to be, you can have this one is creating a Thanksgiving dinner. This one is creating a birthday party. This one is creating a graduation party. Somebody else is creating, I don't know what, a 3-year-old's birthday party. So you can vary it that way. So the idea of what, oh, that wouldn't be good. The idea of creating different things within your curriculum is really what we're talking about in creating those driving questions. And we deal with this all the time. This is what we do in CTE. It's why PBL, in my opinion, is made to order for what we do. Because that's the important piece of it. Okay, so if you go back to these driving questions, these may give you some idea. I did copy the information in the chat room with all of your emails. Anybody who would like to ask me any additional questions, I am available for free to do PBL training in your schools. Here's my email address. And if you have any other questions or you want handouts from this session, please email me at this. Here's my phone number. You can email me for anything you would like. And now I'm open to any additional questions or comments. Anybody else? Okay, I guess we started. Oh, let me see. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Leonard. Are there any standard materials available for PBL? I'm going to send you this template if you give me my address. The Buck Institute, which I think is now called PBL Inc. or PBL Central, I can't remember. They have a lot of materials. I believe the Teacher Center, the DOE's Teacher Center, UFT's Teacher Center also has some materials. You might want to email Leo Gordon. He may be able to send you some books. That would be helpful. But again, there's a lot of free stuff online. And what's the future? Rachel, oh, hi, how are you? This is not a brand new thing. It's gotten a lot of publicity recently. And quite honestly, I think it's here to stay. Whether it's face-to-face or online, this is what our kids need, what CTE requires, and quite honestly, what the world is expecting of our students. It's not just okay for them to be able to regurgitate what the information is. Okay, my email, I'll put it in here. It's Marsha at spnet.us, and my phone number is that. Oh, I put it as privately. I should really put it to everybody, right? Sorry. And 516-606-7016. Okay, I really appreciate, Tanya, would you do me a favor and copy all of these email addresses and send them to me?
I copied the chat, so hopefully that'll work. I'm not sure how to copy each message.
No, that's all right. Copy the chat and send it to
Yeah.
me and I'll take it from there.
Sounds good.
All right. I really appreciate it. I think there is a wrap up to the conference. Yes, in 5 minutes.
I believe so.
Okay. It was really a pleasure to work with you this last hour and a half, and I hope to see all of you again, and stay safe, stay healthy, and I guess enjoy the beautiful sun. I mean, snow.
Snow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marsha.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm in another world. Okay, thanks. Tanya, send me all of that information.
I will.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank
So
you.
long.
Bye, Marsha.
Bye. Great to see all of you. I'll send all that information out today.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Marsha, you are as sharp as ever.
I think she's gone, Gav.
Oh, she is.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty
Amazing, right?
yeah, she hasn't lost a beat.
No. She said at one point about retiring. I'm like, when did you retire? You've never retired.
All right, let me try to figure out how to get back to this main room
The
now.
original one, right? Okay, I'm gonna end it for everybody. Bye all. Jillian, yes, you can contact me. Just send me an email and we'll set some time.